Hello and welcome to the audiobook of Old Rifts and Snowdrifts by Kayla Whaley in the compilation book of Up All Night. So this is my first audiobook in English, so it might have sucked, I don't know. I need to practice my English before I get into St. Lawrence, right? So, oh yeah, by the way, thank you guys for 300 subscribers. I looked at my stats lately and I have like 300 subscribers. I'm up to my 45th audiobook, and it's been like 6 days ago. It was the second anniversary of my first audiobook upload. So thanks you guys, and I hope all my work paid out for you guys. Yeah. Oh, and also over 4,000 hours of audiobooks listened by you guys. It's quite bonkers to me. Some people I don't even know, like in the bus, they're like, "Hey, are the guy does the audiobooks?" I'm like, "Hey, hell yeah, it's kind of fun." Anyway, Old Drifts and Snowdrifts by Kayla Whaley. The snow started falling right as school let out. An aggressive snowfall, the kind that pelts down more like frozen bullets than fluffy flakes. The news had spent days prepping us. Except half an inch, they said, maybe as much as 3/4 in spots. We were all suitably stocked on bread and bottled water, but even in Atlanta, that amount of snow wasn't enough to shut the city down. You needed at least a solid inch of accumulation for that. I made it to primroses and daffodils before the snow started sticking. The sidewalks leading from school to my afternoon job as a sales girl, what a weird word. Like you wouldn't say a sales boy, you say salesman. What is it, saleswoman? Anyway, we're in the greatest shape, but I'd driven the route enough now that the steep curb cuts and awkwardly placed manholes didn't faze me. I wouldn't want to test it on ice though. My treads were in decent shape, but decent traction only gets you so far. "Here, Mrs. Otsuki," I called as the bell above the door chimed my entrance. My best friend Melanie's parents ran the little florist and nursery, rated #1 in the metro area 8 years running, as the framed magazine clips hanging next to the door proudly proclaimed. Melanie had grown here, surrounded by stems and thorns and bursts of blooming color. My own home was caring and warm, but utterly beige in every way. Beige walls, beige carpets, beige terrier mix named Penny. Even our food was all plain roast chicken and cornbread. In 4th grade, when I grew out of my first wheelchair, I chose fuchsia for the replacement, an artificial color that nearly matched its namesake for sheer audacity. The store was slow today. The holiday rush had ended with New Year's and wouldn't kick up again until Valentine's. We had a few weeks of relative quiet to look forward to. The only customer was with Devi over by the bouquet buffet, as we called it. Pre-made arrangements, themed for birthdays, bereavements, congratulations, get well soon, etc. The man glanced up at my arrival, and I stared as I maneuvered behind the counter. His eyes narrowed in confusion and his mouth puckered, arm already half raised in my direction. I quickly pinned my name tag to my sweater and waved pointedly and familiarly at Devi. She waved back. The customer seemed satisfied, if perplexed, that I was where I should be, and turned back to his conversation. "Miss Otsuki? No, Mrs. Otsuki? I'm clocking in," I yelled again. It wasn't unusual for Melanie's mom to hole up in her office. Dealing with customers was her least favorite part of a job, but I didn't hear the telltale synthesized sparkle of 80s pop floating out all from under the door. I knocked a few times, but still nothing. "She's not here today," Devi said from behind me. The bell above the door rang again as the man left empty-handed. Maybe he decided on chocolate instead. "Oh no, is he okay?" Mrs. Otsuki hadn't missed a day since she had her gallbladder removed a few years back, and even then, she insisted she was on call in case a flower-related emergency came up. In her defense, flower-related emergencies come up much more frequently than one might suppose. Norovirus, is it Devi or Dev? Probably Devi. Devi said. She mimed vomiting, full-bodied retching, and all. Devi was the distracting kind of pretty. Soft jaw, dark eyes, warm brown skin that had never even heard the word blackhead before. Even mid-exorcist reenactment, she glowed. She was also in her mid-20s, married, and had an adorable toddler at home, which allowed my aesthetic appreciation to remain a quiet joy instead of morphing into a godforsaken crush. Nothing good ever came from crushes. Yikes, I said, so it's just us today? Devi walked over to the raging station where she was putting the final touches on the bouquets for a wedding tomorrow. Normally it'd be all hands on deck for wedding prep, but this was a small one, intimate. No lavish garlands or dozens of centerpieces filled with baby's breath or carnations for the reception. Just a few small gatherings of blooms for the bride and her bridesmaids. Devi chose an anemone from the spread in front of her and slipped it carefully into the nearest bundle. Not just us, she said. You really think Mr. Green Thumb will let his babies go untended for the day? Speaking of god-forsaken crushes, I glanced to the wall-locked door at the back of the store that read Employees Only and led to the on-site greenhouse, Owen's domain. Melanie's twin brother had always loved flowers. Although love felt like too small a word for the innate connection he had to them. Mr. Green Thumb, indeed. He and I had our own little garden, just the two of us when we were young. But Owen was always the visionary. I would have been happy planting tomatoes or sweet peas or tulips all willy-nilly. Owen persuaded me to have patience. Even as a child, he didn't merely plant a garden. He curated one and invited me into the process. The seasonal cycles within that small, bounded bit of land were as much temporal touchstones for me as holidays or birthdays. When I think about Melanie, 9 years old and reckless, crashing her bike and dislocating her shoulder, I see the carpet with geraniums that had just begun to open. The afternoon of a near-miss tornado one spring is, in my memory, colored for Cynthia gold against a gunmetal sky. I've caught only glimpses of the garden over the past year, though, ever since Owen and I stopped speaking. I don't know when I pass by. I don't want to know what he's growing now. But maybe that's why time has felt so slippery lately. I've lost my sun-warmed tether. I situated myself at the register, determined not to think about him back there. His sleeves rolled up to his forearms, dirt-streaked apron tied at his waist. He abandoned me. It doesn't matter what I did or didn't feel for him. He made his own feelings explicitly clear on my last birthday. I stared out the shop's large display windows. Behind the vases of pink camellias, sweet alyssum, winter honeysuckle, and snowdrops, actual snow fell steadily in the dim afternoon light. I hope it lets up before I have to leave, Devi said, following my gaze. These boots are suede, I smiled. Don't worry, this is supposed to be the worst of it. 3 hours later, the snow was halfway to the windowsill and still coming down. Jesus, look at this, Devi said, handing me her phone. Helicopter footage taken over the I-75, then I-85, and then I-285. That's like it's like the U.S. highway system or something. Showed all the major highways in Atlanta were at a complete standstill. Hundreds of cars in each successive shot were parked on the interstate. Yeah, that's what that is. Snow piling up around them as their drivers hunkered up, trapped. They're gonna be out there all night at this rate, I said. Handing Devi's phone back, I glanced at my own phone. No calls from Mom yet, but service was always spotty in construction sites. Dad had checked in an hour ago to say he's waiting at the office until the storm cleared up to come get me. I had a feeling he'd be waiting quite a while, which I meant I would be too. I tried to shrug away my irritation at being stuck here. It would do me no good to turn into old man shakes fist at clouds. That's a Simpsons reference, by the way. Although it did occur to me that if I had an accessible van and could actually drive myself, I'd gone home hours ago. Teen Crip shakes fist at capitalism, them. Isn't that like a slur or something? The local roads are even worse, Devi said, turning her screen to me again. It's all ice, completely impassable. Except if you live in Quebec, if you know what I mean. Oh God, look at the buses, I said. A handful of school buses idled in the middle of the road, one of them having fishtailed, although it didn't appear to have hit anything. Small, shadowed bodies were visible through the dark windows. Middle schoolers, I guess. Shit, Melanie has made it home? She had a Latin club after school on Wednesdays. She was probably wouldn't have headed home until the ice was starting to build. I grabbed my phone and texted her. You okay? You make it home? I am fine. She texted back seconds later. Still at school. Couldn't even get out of the parking lot while my car sliding all over. At school by yourself? No worry, Wart. Most of us stayed, including Mrs. Pritchett. We might end up having to spend the night here. It's like a scared emoji, like you want an emoji? Whoa! I think teens locked in school overnight is how 80% of slasher movies start. Wow, super helpful. I was texting Melanie about my own Snowden situation when Devi stood so abruptly her chair nearly tipped over. She stared at her phone in something like horror and something like anger. Damn it! This is why you should never hire high schoolers. No offense. None taken. She started gathering her things, shoving her phone and water bottle into her purse, searching around for something or other she must have misplaced. My husband is stuck at work because half the night shift nurses couldn't make it in, which, fine, but now her babysitter's parents are demanding she comes home right this minute, and her neighbors are stuck God knows where, which means I have to somehow make it over a mile home on foot in a legitimate blizzard in my suede shoes. Sweat, I think that's how we pronounce it. Jesus, fuck! Wait. She turned to me, almost in slow motion. I could practically hear her brain churning as she stared. What now? I asked wearily. I can't just leave you, Eleanor. What if you... She trailed off, eyes roving over me, as if the words she wanted were written somewhere on my person. Need something? I can just leave someone like you alone? What kind of monster? Someone cleared their throat. Disabled. What? Devi asked, turning again, this time so sharply I thought she'd break her heel. Owen leaned against the ranging counter, arms lightly crossed at his chest, legs crossed at the ankle, like he hadn't just magically appeared out of nowhere. You don't want to leave someone disabled alone, he corrected her, but in any case, she's not alone. His eyes found mine and held. The room felt suddenly small and too warm for a snowstorm to be raging outside. He smiled lightly, a little more than a twitch of his lips, but the expression was so familiar it hurt. I looked away. Right, Devi said. Right, yes, okay, and your mom would be cool with you looking after her. I sighed, but before I could tell her that I did not need a babysitter, and I was sitting right here, Owen said, You cool with staying with me, Nori? I flinched at the nickname. He gave it to me when we were 6 years old during my brief seaweed obsession. I plowed through Nori so fast that Miss Otsuki started stocking my own dedicated container of the salty sheets in their pantry. He thought he was so clever. Eleanori, Nori. I hadn't heard the name in so long and felt like it belonged to some other girl. Sorry, he said softly, seeing the change in my expression. Eleanor. I was not cool staying with him. Definitely not. Every time I was around him, my stomach got all knotted up and my face got heated, and I was still just so angry with him. Who does that? Who stands up one of their best friends on their birthday? Birthdays were our thing. Melanie never understood our rabid need to one up the other. To her, birthdays were for cake and a few presents and maybe a funky hat or something. But to us, birthdays weren't a celebration. They were a competition to prove who was the better friend. We took the game seriously. Each year a more outrageous gift, a more extravagant surprise. So at first I thought maybe the lateness was part of a plan. I waited and waited. But there was no text, no call, not even a message relayed via Melanie. Just me telling everyone else to go get popcorn and seats. I'll come in when Owen gets here. No, don't worry. At most, we'll miss the trailers. Half an hour after showtime, Melody came out and found me still in the lobby, staring at my phone, as if he might step right off the screen and explain. He's been so distant lately, I said to her. Is he mad at me? She shrugged helplessly. Come on, she said. Becca's wondering where you are. I followed Melanie into the dark theater where I sat to my maybe girlfriend, we hadn't made anything official, and ignored the silent tears running down my face. He never bothered explaining and I never bothered asking. I shouldn't have had to ask. It was the principle of the thing. When he passed me in the hall the next day at school, he didn't say a word, just tipped his chin at me as he hadn't broken our tradition with a warning or even acknowledgement. The message wasn't hard to decipher. He didn't want to be friends anymore. Fine, we weren't friends. Now with his eyes steadily on me, waiting to hear if I was indeed cool with this development, I pushed away that familiar pain in my chest and gestured out the window. Where else am I gonna go? Oh God. Oh thank God, Devi said. Okay, you kids be safe. Call someone if you need something. Not me, obviously, but your parents or whatever. She made for the door. Before she pushed it open, she took a long, steadying breath and whispered, I'm so sorry, Boots. And then there were two. Dun, dun, dun. A heavy dusting of snow blew in as Devi blew out, enough to leave a sheen on the pale pink tile once it melted. We should probably mop that up, I said, so no one slips. As soon as the word wore out, I felt ridiculous. No one was going to slip because no one else was coming in for the rest of the night. Or rather, the rest of the night. The sky was fully dark already, the sun having gone to bed early as it was custom in January. Oh God, bed. If we were stuck here all night, which seemed unavoidable at this point, where the hell was I going to sleep? Okay, Owen said, then turned and made for the supply closet. I didn't mean right now. I did mean right now, of course, but that was before I realized mopping didn't need doing at all. He pushed the bucket over to the door. But what if somebody slips? He said, barely tampering down a teasing smile. I stuck my tongue out before I could stop myself. Like perennials, old habits die hard. He mopped methodically, I think that's how you say it, moving from left to right, tile by tile. Every so often he dunked the mop into the warm, soapy water as carefully as you might dip a quill in ink. It's been so long since I watched him work. I'd almost forgotten how magnetizing his focus was. Even something as rote as mopping a floor merited concentration, care. Soon he was squeegeeing the last of the soapy residue away and the floor was dry once more. Crisis averted, he said, beaming. I smiled despite myself and realized it was the longest conversation we had in over a year. My chest clenched and I grabbed my phone, pretending to text or tweet or whatever one does when one's pretending to be busy on their phone. I didn't look up when the bucket's wheels squeaked away towards the closet, when the greenhouse door quietly opened and closed. I didn't look up until I was sure he wasn't coming back. Mom finally called a while later. The ringing startled me after an hour where the only sounds were the heater periodically turning on and the low, steady buzz of the refrigerator along the far wall. About time, I said, by way of greeting. What? Mom shouted. Her end of the call was pure noise, all loud voices, clanging glasses, and blaring country music. Oh no, the worst kind of music. Are you in a bar? I asked, raising my voice to match her volume. No, I'm not in the car. Couldn't even get off site. We're next door to a bar. Oh my God, with the yelling! I yelled back. Hang on, she said. More shuffle and bustle as she presumably moved toward the crowd before the noise blessedly dimmed. Sorry, I'm outside now, she said. God, it's freezing out here. Well, we are in the middle of an unprecedented snowstorm. Dad said you're at the shop. Is Mrs. Atsuki with you? Did you eat? How are you on bathroom? Where are you gonna do about sleep? At the back of the store, the door to the greenhouse opened. Owen stopped suddenly when I looked up. Sorry, he mouthed, pointing to my phone. I stared at him, my ears burning and faintly ringing. Can you hear me? Mom asked. Are you with Carol? Eleanor? Can you hear me? Yeah, no, she was sick today, I heard myself saying. I'm honestly surprised I managed to get that much out, because for reasons only God herself could fathom. Hey, is our character a third-wave feminist, an Ariana Grande fan, or both? Owen was standing there in the doorway, completely shortless. Mamma mia! His apron was still around his waist, but he'd undone the tie behind his neck so the top half hung over his khakis. Inexplicably, he rode his gardening gloves too, thick leather affairs that looked more suited to swinging an axe than pruning some roses. pants, an apron, and gloves, and nothing else. I focused hard on the gloves. Emphasis on hard. Willed myself not to look away, but my mind superimposed the other view over the top, like stubborn ink ghosting through a page. Didn't matter that I was being good and holding my gaze steady. All I could see was skin and hard planes, and all I could think was, how did gardening give you abs? You're there alone? Mom said, shouting again. Screeching, more like. What? I pulled the phone slightly away from my ear. No, I'm not alone. Quite against my wishes, my eyes moved up his forearm, bicep, shoulder, from the smooth curve of his neck to his disgustingly perfect jawline, until finally, I met his eyes. Owen's with me. I could see his throat move when he swallowed, all the way from the front of the store. And was he blushing? He grabbed a tiny pot of gardenias from the shelf nearest him and studied the petals. I turned my attention back to Mom. Oh, thank God, she said. You're in good hands then. Right now I was blushing. I did not want to think about Owen's hands. His beautiful hands. What was that, honey? I froze. What? I didn't say anything. You're mumbling something about beautiful lands? Oh my actual God. I need to get off this phone. Mom, don't worry about me. I'll be fine. I'll see you tomorrow, okay? Okay, love you. I hung up so fast that the phone slipped and clattered to the floor. Owen rushed over, still holding the gardenias, and knelt. He handed me the small terracotta pot and pulled his gloves off. Here, he said, holding my phone out to me. With him kneeling like this, I was the slightest bit taller than him. It was nice not having to crane my neck to look at him. Carefully, I took my phone away from him. Thanks. He shrugged and leaned back on his heels. Of course. Why are you naked? I blurted. Surprise and horror and weirdly delight all ran across his face at once, until he seemed to settle on bemusement. I'm not naked. I rolled my eyes. Half naked, whatever. You're partially disrobed. Disrobed? Is that mouth twitching? Partially. Isn't this still a place of business? Owen raised a brow, the laughter obvious in his eyes. I meant to sound harsh, but he clearly wasn't intimidated. I think it's safe to say we're closed for the night. Although for your information, I was working. It gets hot back there with the heat lamps and humidity. That was annoyingly reasonable. Okay, fine, but why are you half naked out here? I heard you yelling, he said. Then, softly, I had to make sure you were okay. Heat rushed to my face. Embarrassed heat. Because you're stuck here being my babysitter for the night, right? There was more venom in my voice than I expected, the words cutting more surely than shears through dried-out bush. I didn't like how satisfying that felt. But neither did I like how Owen looked as if he'd been slapped. Is that... He trailed off, shook his head slightly, then looked at me. Do you really think so little of me? I didn't answer. My silence said plenty. He reached out for the gardenias I'd forgotten I was still holding in my lap. His fingers slipped gently under mine, and I shivered. He didn't look at me as he pulled the flowers away and stood. I keep a stash of ramen in the back. Do you want some? I nodded, but his back was turned entirely away now. Please. Still prefer beef over chicken? Are you suggesting that I might have lost my refried palate? I asked, exaggerating the final words. He didn't notice the old inside joke, one of our mainstays. Or if he did, he didn't react. We'd been watching a Food Network marathon one summer afternoon, and the chef suggested using beef broth instead of chicken for those with a more refined palate. Naturally, we rejected all chicken-based meals for weeks, citing our refried palates. Our mispronunciation was too cute to correct, but we were made to eat the chicken regardless. Beef would be great, I said. I ate my ramen alone. I'm sorry to say it was delicious. Owen simmered it with some perfectly wilted bok choy and fresh scallions, and topped the brothy noodles with a few thin slices of raw ginger, all from the little vegetable garden Mrs. Otsiki let him maintain for the store. Primroses and daffodils wasn't in the produce business, but fresh veggies did help get customers to the farmer's market booth. From there, it was nothing to sell a bouquet or two of flowers to go along with the carrots and peppers and beets. "Since when does your brother know how to cook?" I texted Melanie, mostly out of boredom. 11 o'clock and the snow was still falling, though gently now, more like the passing flurries we're used to. Even if it had stopped hours ago, though, there was no hope of making it home. The roads would be frozen at least until early tomorrow afternoon, the news said. We were well and truly snowed in. My pulse skipped as reality finally hit. Fuck, what am I going to do? If I was being honest, I've been avoiding thinking about the whole sleeping situation. None of us who were stranded were likely to get much sleep tonight, but Melody and Dad and Mom and even Owen could all stretch out on the floor, bunch their jacket up at pillows and pretend they were comfortable. I had no such options. I had to tilt back in my chair and try to rest. But this thing was not meant to be sat in for 24 hours. It would hurt. It was already starting to hurt, frankly. My hips, my back, my neck. I'd live, but this was gonna suck. Lol, as Mom... Oh, this is back into the texting conversation with Melanie. That's Melanie. Well, as Mom likes to say, he doesn't cook so much as heat up. Well, his ramen is heavenly. Wait. Owen's with you at the shop and you're talking? Well, talking might be a little extreme. Melanie has been pestering me to talk to Owen and make amends for months now. I think she thought things would blow over at the beginning. Now that it had become clear that it wasn't about to happen, she'd be dying for me to budge. I know it was weird for her to have her best friend and twin brother on such bad terms, but it's not like any of this was my fault. I wouldn't be the one to care. Ugh, Miss Pritchett says it's lights out. Rolling eyes emoji. Talk to Owen, you goober. Love you. Love you too. Sleep well. I glanced at the time again, 11:25, and decided to try to get comfy. At least I was dry and warm, which was probably more than Devi's Swed's shoes could say. I turned the lights off and tucked myself into the corner behind the front desk right under the heater vent. With a press of the button, my chair reclined, stretching my grateful spine and hips. I used my jacket, long since dry from the walkover, like a blanket. Outside all was black and white, the world's usual shapes and shadings erased for now. I never really understood the breathless fascination with snow, but watching the hushed drifts slowly layering themselves into existence as my muscles relaxed and my eyes grew heavy, I could finally see the appeal. And then, right as I was about to tumble into sleep, the power cut out. I sat in front of the greenhouse door, imagining I could already feel the warmth of the heavy-duty gas heater. Behind that door was an oasis, 80 degrees and gentle humidity. For most of you people, that's 27 Celsius. 365 days a year. I raised my fist and let it hover. The store might not get too cold, but Mrs. Otsiki always kept the thermostat at 68 degrees Fahrenheit, or 20 Celsius if you prefer, so there wasn't much warmth stored up to begin with, and a quick look at my weather app said it would be dipping into the teens before long. A chill raced through me at the thought of spending the rest of the night without heat, immediately chased by another chill at the alternative. I couldn't remember the last time I'd spent in the greenhouse. Even before the rift, I didn't spend a lot of time back there. The aisles were cramped, and there were always hoses or tools. There were trays of this and that lying around, making the floor near unnavigable for me. I didn't mind, though. Even when we were kids working the garden, me handing Owen seeds or pointing out weeds for him to pull or just making friends with the ladybugs. I was never interested in the growing process as he was. I was only in it for the end product. Well, and the company. Pull your shit together, Eleanor. Knock on the damn door. The door swung open after just one knock, like he'd been waiting for me. He stood aside and gestured me with the sweep of an arm. Thankfully, he was fully robed this time. I know damn well you wanted to see him naked. A blast of warmth greeted me as I entered. I hadn't realized how chilly I'd been. Even before the power went out, hours of sitting next to the front window, cold seeping steadily through the glass, had turned my skin cool as marble. I shivered and moved toward the heat. You redecorated, I said, my gaze roving over the room's strange new configuration. Wooden benches that act as nurseries for all the dozens of plants normally stretched the length of the structure in 6 long rows. Now they were shoved awkwardly towards the edges of the room, a pile up 3 benches deep on both sides, leaving an overstuffed chair draped with at least 4 blankets and a low, round coffee table topped with a steaming teapot and 2 teacups. Next to it, an old-school lantern glowed, its soft flame defiant under a glassed-in, moonless midnight. Owen slipped past me, letting the door close behind us. I told you I was working earlier. He bent over a gas heater, adjusting some settings or other, either for the plant's sake or ours. My money was on the former. Plants are surprisingly hardy, he always said, but just because they can endure a lot doesn't mean they should have to. While he tinkered, I stared at the little tableau in front of me. A clear path led from the door, no tools lying haphazardly around or spilled soil waiting to gum up my threads. The concrete floor looked dewy, recently mopped, and at the end of the runway, he'd placed this one chair next to a perfectly wheelchair-sized empty space. He'd done all of this for me. What, in case the power went out? Or did he think I'd come back here just because? Did he want me to? I imagined him in here earlier, shirtless and sweaty, as he moved every piece of furniture in this room, as he picked up the mess that always littered the floor, as he found a charming little teapot and an absurd gas lantern of all things, and I felt anger coiled deep in my gut. He sat down, sinking comically deep in his plushy armchair, and started pouring what smelled suspiciously like peppermint tea. "Drink," he said, holding the tiny cup out to me. I was still loitering near the doorway, tucked into my shadowed border of the room. "You hate peppermint tea," I said. He set the cup down and picked up his own. "I don't hate it." "So you don't like it?" "So?" he sighed, mild irritation creeping to the world. "So you know it's my favorite," I snapped, unable and unwilling to sugar my voice. "So what the fuck, Owen?" He stared at me for a minute, an expression I couldn't quite read. He grabbed the cup and crossed the 20 feet between us in a few long strides, eyes never leaving mine. "Drink the tea, Eleanor," he said, thrusting the cup in front of me so forcefully that some of the hot liquid sloshed out and over his fingers. He didn't seem to notice. "Or don't. I don't care." It was the strangest standoff I've ever experienced, the two of us glaring at each other over the rim of a floral-printed teacup, steam drifting up between us. If the air hadn't felt so charged, I would have laughed. I took the cup. Owen stalked back to the improvised sitting area, and I followed. We sat in silence, each of us nursing our tea, which was, like the ramen, delicious, hot enough to feel all the way to your belly, but not enough to burn, and steeped to perfection, strong, no hedging. The scent of peppermint wreathed me and created a surprising harmony with the myriad garden smells, wet soil, rose, and jasmine, the crisp of clear water, and all around us, snowfall. If I ignored the boy across from me, it was almost peaceful. "I'm not stuck here, you know," he said mildly. "What?" "Earlier, you said I was stuck here with you. But I could leave any time. The house isn't all that far. Maybe a mile? It sucked, but I couldn't make it." All hints of peacefulness evaporated. "Fuck you, Owen." He leaned forward, elbows pressed into his knees, hands clasped tight together. "Why don't I leave, Nori?" His voice was soft, almost curious, as he asked nothing more offensive than how the weatherman has gotten a forecast so wrong. My eyes prickled. I whittled them dry. "I don't know," I said, my voice shockingly steady. "It's not like it'd be the first time you bailed on me." A spark of something flashed in his eyes. Again, I couldn't read him. When had he lost his legibility? When he'd cut me off, or maybe before, when he first started pulling away. He took a breath, but I interrupted him before he could speak. "Go home, Owen. You want to go? Go. No one's stopping you." He threw his hands up. "You're not listening. I don't want to leave you." "Of course not," I spat. "Can't possibly leave the little crippled girl alone." Yeah, I think that's a slur, actually. "I'm sorry to all my handicapped all my wheelchair. What's the word? All my wheelchair bound people out there. He growled, like honest to God, growled. Something flipped low in his stomach at the sound. I don't want to leave you, he said, enunciating each word so he could practically chew them up. Without warning, he slipped from his chair and knelt before me, like he'd done earlier. I only realized my hands were shaking when he cupped them and slid the trembling teacup gently out of my grasp. He wrapped his hands around mine again, his skin warm and rough to the touch. My breath hitched. I'm saying I want to be here, Nori. I'm not staying because of the snow or because I feel obligated to. I know you don't need me. You made that abundantly clear over the last year. I'm here because I want to be. Abundantly clear, he said. You made that abundantly over the past. I snatched my hands away. Don't you dare. You were the one that left me? Or did you not remember standing up to me on my birthday of all days? He stood sharply. It was so close, it hurt to look up at him. I glared anyway. Neck be damned. Why are you so impossible? He punctuated the final word by spitting on his heel and pacing away from me. I shouted after him, You don't get to be angry, Owen. I didn't start this. You're the one who left me crying and alone in the theater. He leaned over one of the benches, head down, back to me. He exhaled long and slow. As the air left him, he looked more and more defeated. What about Becca? He asked quietly, almost pleadingly. The question threw me, confused and edging out the earlier anger. My ex? What about her? Wasn't she there? On your birthday? What does that have to do with anything? He was quiet for a long moment, leaning over his plants in the dark. When he finally spoke, his voice had a strange, thin quality that for some reason brought to mind the dandelions Melanie and I used to braid into crowns and pile onto Owen's head, like birds building a nest. I never meant for us to stop being friends, he said. I needed some distance, and I didn't go about it the right way. I know I didn't mean to hurt you. I didn't think you'd even notice. I'm sorry, Nori. I took the opportunity to study him. His shoulder blades arched toward each other over his spine, as if trying to hold him up. The hair at the nape of his neck was curled slightly from the humidity. He didn't move, seemed barely even to breathe. I imagined, somewhat wildly, that if I kept my silence, we might stay this way forever. His plants would grow, and our bodies would age, and the sun would twirl its way around and around these glass walls. But we would remain cemented in place, figurines in a terrarium. What did I do? I couldn't keep the shake out of my voice this time. What did I do wrong? He turned, brow-frowned. Nothing. You did nothing wrong. I had to done something wrong. Because if I didn't, then that just means you got tired of me. I felt the tears coming again. I didn't try to stop them this time. We were past that now, for better or worse. You just didn't like me anymore and tossed me aside. Owen crossed the room almost before the last word left my mouth. For the third time that night, he got on his knees in front of me. My heartbeat thrummed away in my throat. He lifted a hand, tentatively, slowly enough that I could stop him if I wanted, and wiped the few spilled tears from my cheek. Is that what you thought this whole time? No wonder you stopped speaking to me. What the hell else was I supposed to think? He laughed slightly. Fair point. Owen pulled his hand away. I flushed hard when I realized I had leaned forward, following his retreating touch. Don't you remember when you were little? He said. How I rubbed dirt all over me before we played in the garden. I laughed. All over your arms, your legs, your face. I smiled at the image of little Owen came back to me. You look ridiculous. Mom would get so mad. Now you're gonna have to shower again. Are you gonna pay the water bill this month? His impressions were scarcely spot on. Do you remember the way I did it? He searched back through the haze of memory for the exact toddler logic he used. You said you want to be a part of them, not apart from them. Propositional wordplay, so precocious, he said, rolling his eyes at his younger self. When he looked at me again, something changed. The air between us warmed from more than the gas heater, and I realized how truly little space there was between us. He licked his bottom lip. My breath caught. When you started dating Becca, it was like, not like a light switching up. That's not it at all. He glanced around, frustrated, before his face lit up in triumph. You know what it was like? It was like the day after an unheard of snowstorm. There had been nothing but gray clouds all day, right? But the sun comes up the next morning, the sky is so blue and the ground is so white, and the light reflects off of absolutely everything. The entire world is sunlight. And it's so brilliant, it burns. But if you to look away, you worry we might never see sun like this again. Owen, you're making less sense than 0 cents right now. He took a breath, then reached out and took my hand. None of this made any sense. When you started dating Becca, I realized I didn't want to be apart from you. I wanted us to be together. But you didn't want that, and I didn't know how to be a good friend to you with all of this sunlight in my eyes. I'm mixing metaphors. I'm sorry. My chest hurt, literally. It took a second to realize the sharp burn behind my ribs was my lungs demanding air. I'd stopped breathing sometime during his speech. Air deprivation wasn't exactly helping me process. I closed my eyes and pulled a deep, slow breath through my nose. Owen, ever patient, didn't ask what I was doing or repeat himself or I demand I respond. He simply waited with me. How did you know? I finally asked, my eyes still closed. When I opened them, his head was tilted in question. How did you know I didn't want to be together? I clarified. That I didn't want you? Owen blinked a few times, then a few more. It was satisfying to see him look flustered as I felt. His hand was still holding mine, and I squeezed gently, pulling him back to me. Becca and I weren't ever official, but I did officially break it off the week after my birthday. Did you know that? I did, but I broke it off because standing in the dark in that theater, I had never felt more alone. I was heartbroken, Owen, and I hadn't even realized giving my heart to you in the first place. I paused and felt my blood pulsing in my wrist right under Owen's thumb. It was a lot to process at once, honestly. He looked up at me with the most hope and fear I've ever seen mixed into one gaze. And then you didn't say a word. Not once, Owen. Not one, Owen. I know No, I said. It's my turn to talk. He looked up at me sheepishly. Yes, ma'am. I ignored the way my body reacted to that and kept on. You should have assumed. You should have talked to me. The words rang false even to my own ears. I blew out a heavy sigh. But I did the exact same thing to you. I assumed you hated me, and I flat out refused to talk to you. You started this, but I made damn sure it continued. Why didn't we just talk to each other? We're talking now, he said reasonably. His fingers dragged along my palm, almost absently, but the way his eyes lit up at my sudden inhale proved he knew exactly what he was doing. I swallowed hard and tried again. I think we've done enough talking, for now, maybe. He nodded solemnly and raised himself higher on his knees. Our eyes held as he ran his knuckle lightly under my jaw and leaned forward. Is this okay? He said. I mean, can I? I don't want to assume. Oh, Natsuki, don't kiss me right this moment, I swear. He kissed me, no more hesitating. He tasted like peppermint and ginger. He felt like home. I parted my lips and he pressed harder. Okay, this is just weird now. Harder than I think he meant. My head snapped back from the force and I gasped in panic. Owen caught me, his hand firm on the back of my neck, bracing me. Did I hurt you? He asked. Are you okay? He held me steady, his fingers on my scalp a promise. I'm more than okay. I was safe. I ignored my body's instincts and relaxed into his palm, letting my head fall back toward the slanted glass roof. Snow was still falling. I nearly opened my mouth to catch the flakes. I felt delirious, unreal. But then Owen's mouth feathered along the side of my exposed throat and I snapped back to myself. I was real. This was weird. This was real. Here in this body, in this room, in this moment, with the boy I loved in one way or another my entire life. He gently tilted my head upright and kissed me proper again. I stopped thinking all apart at that point. When we finally broke apart, he rested his forehead on mine. We sat there a long moment, just breathing, his hand in my hair and mine on his forearm. I pulled away first. "Wait a minute," I said. "Is this why Melanie's been on my case about talking to you? Did she know?" Owen shrugged. "I don't think so, but maybe she suspected. Did she know about you?" "Absolutely not. No way. I thought about back to the movie at the movie theater when she had held me while I cried over her brother and realized maybe not everyone was oblivious to my own feeling as I was. Okay, it's possible she might have figured it out." He laughed, the sound ringing through the room. "So my sister is a terrible wingwoman. Noted. The good news is neither of us should be needing her services anytime soon." A pause, a flash of doubt. "Right?" I leaned in and kissed him again. I could do that now, I thought, kiss him. So I did it one more time before saying, "Right." In the morning, the sun came up and the sky was so blue and the ground was so white that the light reflected off absolutely everything. Neither one of us looked away. And that is the end. It was kind of weird narrating that kissing scene. Thank you to Coralie for pretty much screaming from across the class to make an audiobook about this chapter. I kind of regret it now, and thanks for listening. And don't forget to support the original authors by buying the book if you hadn't already, because I'm doing copyright infringement.